Welcome to More Than Words, a podcast about treating the whole child brought to you by the Reading and Language Learning Center. I'm your host, Tristan, and today I'm joined by mental health specialist Stephanie Kaiser to discuss parent mental health. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Hi, Tristan. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. We're excited for you to be here too. We've had a handful of episodes on mental health, but not a ton, and not one specifically on parent mental health. So this is going to be fantastic. We're excited that you're here.
Oh, good. Awesome. I'm really, really happy to sort of open this conversation. Obviously, mental health is something that I don't think that we talk about enough. And so I'm really sort of grateful to have the privilege of coming here today and being able to answer some questions for people.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Stephanie, let's have you start with an introduction. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I just graduated from Northwestern University with a
Woohoo.
master's in mental health clinical counseling. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to never do homework again. Um, I am currently at Mid Atlantic Psychotherapy. So it is a psychotherapy practice here in the DMV area. We service DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Originally, it was built as a virtual practice, but we are actually opening our first in person location. Very, very exciting. In the Tysons, Vienna
Wow.
area. Yeah. So if you are sort of looking for a place to start in terms of therapy practices for everybody listening, we can be found at midatlantic psychotherapy.com, or our in-person location is going to be 8320 Old Courthouse Road in Vienna. So, yeah, lots of exciting stuff kind of coming up for us in the practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll put your website and everything in the show notes and then your address as well. I think you're like kind of close to our Vienna location.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hop into these questions. So, a lot of parents are focused on getting help for their child. So, what does it look like to shift that lens and start with the parent's mental health first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that parents often are conditioned from the very beginning to put their children first. And while that instinct comes from a really, really beautiful place, I think that it can leave parents forgetting that they also have a parenthood too. It's not just the children, it's not just the childhood. I think that a message that I really want to convey to parents is that you deserve to actually enjoy the parts of parenthood that you want to and can enjoy. I mean, obviously, there are going to be times you're getting grown up on. And do we want to be up at 5 a.m. on Saturday for a soccer game? Maybe not. But there are definitely so many beautiful parts of that I know exist in parenthood as well. And every family deserves to be happy. And the truth is that we feed off of each other's emotions constantly. And so if a parent is struggling, overwhelmed, emotionally unstable, that energy doesn't stay contained. It ripples outward and inevitably impacts the child. And so kids are far more attuned to I say our, not just as parents, but as adults kind of in general, are attuned to the inner worlds of adults around them more than we kind of give them credit for. And so I think that it's important for parents and kind of all adults to simply not just, try to hide things from kids, but
Mm.
to really, understand that how we function, as much as we think we can control it, and control how, our children perceive it, we can't really do that. And I think that there's also something really important that happens when we keep things inside and don't talk about them. So, it can impact, for example, our health. Our health gets worse, not better. When we don't process what we're going through, our nervous system, it's going to hold on to that. So we start moving through life carrying weight that prevents us from showing up as our authentic selves. And often we end up holding onto shame, never needed to live there in the first place. Research consistently shows that we regret the things that we didn't say or address far more than the things that we did. And
Wow.
there's really just a gift that comes from working on yourself. When you build your own emotional intelligence through therapy or self reflection, you're not just helping yourself, you're really modeling those skills for your children as well. So, you're teaching them in real time what it looks like to be self aware, process emotions, ask for help, things like that. And I think that that's, a really set of powerful gifts we can give and teach our children. And so I think that that's really how I think parents should approach working on themselves.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying, the modeling. Recently, I was talking with one of the SLPs here at RLLC about totally different kind of modeling, but we were talking about AAC devices. And they're like, oh, you can model like how to use someone's AAC device by like, asking permission first and then like using the device with them. And you don't realize how much your own actions kind of impact the way that your kids behave or like the people that you're working with even like like act. So I appreciate you saying like the modeling piece is so important, right? Like if your kids are seeing you take care of yourself, like what's their natural reaction going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're social creatures. That's kind of something that's so amazing about us as humans is that we have the ability to learn from each other. I don't know how much you know about mirror neurons, but we have those. So mirror neurons, just a quick little psycho ed. We have basically cells in our brain that are dedicated to taking in information that is focused on what other people are doing and allowing us to sort of mirror exactly what they're doing. So
Wow.
yeah, so the brain really is built to learn from the people around us, and to be able to act in ways that are similar to exactly what we're seeing.
Wow. So we were chatting about like parents kind of shifting that lens, starting with their own mental health first. So I kind of want to touch on why it's so hard for parents to prioritize their own well-being, even when they know that it matters a ton. Like, why is it hard for them to get there?
Yeah, so I think that one of the most common things I see is parents who come in convinced that their child is the one who needs fixing. And I want to say this with a lot of compassion because that belief is actually, I think, can sometimes be a form of self protection. I
Mm,
think it's a lot easier, and much less vulnerable to locate the problem outside of yourself. And on the surface, like that can even look and seem selfless. I just want help for my child. I'm not the one who matters here. Um, but in my work with parents, I have seen that it can also be a way of avoiding discomfort and turning that lens inward where it kind of really needs to go. The courageous thing and the thing that actually creates important and impactful change is being willing to ask what role you might be playing in the dynamic. So not necessarily to assign blame, but because you're an adult in the relationship, and that means that you have the most power, it's important to sort of acknowledge that and realize that you have the ability to shift things as well. So I think that when a parent is willing to do that, everything sort of changes. And the child almost never needs to be sort of the starting point of change. I think that in a lot of ways, the parent kind of does.
wow, that is very insightful. And I feel like, if anyone consumes content on social media of just like babies and all of that kind of stuff, you always get the concept of like, they're new to this. Like, this is their first time being in the world. This is their first time doing X, Y, or Z, right? And I feel like you kind of just mentioned that in saying that it doesn't generally start with the kid, right? Like they're new to all of these emotions. They're new to all of this stuff that is, maybe going on in their brain. And all, like you said, mirror neurons, like things that they're seeing and like repeating back. And so in all reality, like you as the adult are probably the one that not has to work on yourself, but like, is the one to start getting things kind of like sorted and figuring out like you said, what's going on with you and starting with not you as the source of the problem, but I think you get what I mean.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I definitely don't want the message to be right that parents are the source of the problem. That's not
Right, right, sorry.
that's not what I'm saying. Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. But I think that that's neither of us are saying that, and I think that that's also important to sort of convey to listeners as well. I think for a lot of parents, their inclination is sort of like, "Oh no, there's something wrong. I don't want."
Mm,
Anything to be wrong with my child. I want them to be healthy and happy. And so I need to outsource. I need to bring in an expert. I need to take them somewhere to get it fixed. I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can. And so I think that I love that sentiment. I love that idea. I think that we could also shift it to like, what can I do in the home to make things happier and healthier and stress free? I think that a lot of we want, again, like outsource, but also insource like what's going on inside of the home. I think that when parents work on themselves, it then just kind of naturally creates a healthier environment that might lead to alleviating a lot of the things that we sort of label as problems or symptoms. A lot of that might just sort of naturally kind of dissipate. And again, I don't think that the intention of parents is ever bad.
Right.
But I think that oftentimes we don't consider all the options or consider ways to sort of get creative about our own role in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So when parents start doing their own work, what are some of the like first changes that you tend to see in that parent-child relationship?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, I think that it kind of starts with shifts within the parents. So
Mm.
I think that what I sort of tend to see first is a shift in awareness. And that might sound small, but awareness really can change everything. So when a parent starts doing their own work, they might begin to notice things they were moving, too fast on or feeling too overwhelmed with to see before. And so that awareness creates a little bit of space between the trigger and then the reaction. And in that space, something new not only becomes possible, but it's really important that, change happens in that space so that we can ultimately change how we are responding to triggers in our environment.
Right.
And so I want to name something that can catch parents off guard once that awareness really starts to grow. And that's going to be the very real temptation to use it against yourself.
Mm.
Because once you know you should be doing better and you realize you're making mistakes in the moment, and you're trying to change and, improve or do something different, and you still kind of are caught in this space where you haven't grown that new muscle to make that change, or to automatically react different in a situation, you're going to sort of become a lot more self-critical. That self-criticism can get a lot louder before it gets quieter. But I just want to acknowledge that awareness isn't the finish line. It's just the beginning of practice, changing the way that you're going to be instinctively responding, especially in hard moments, moments where we are upset, frustrated, confused, sad, all of those things. I really want to stress that it's about building new muscle memory, and that new muscle memory is going to take an enormous amount of repetition to shift. So be patient with yourself, sort of in that progress. And again, the goal is not perfection the moment you gain insight. And then I think that sort of another thing that I see when I think about the dynamic between parent and child is that things kind of start to open up. There's more room for honesty. There's more room for curiosity, for connection. And this is going to be, I sort of see it come from the fact that the parent is showing up more present and less defensive. And one of the most beautiful things that can sort of follow this is that both the parent and the child become better at regulating themselves and better at regulating
Mm.
together. And so this is a concept known as co-regulation. And that's going to be a process in which one person's calm, genuinely helping, that sort of attitude, that vibe is going to really help to settle the other person's nervous system. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about, mirror neurons, the social connections that we have. When we see how another person is responding, our brain and our body are taking in so much of that information that we're not even aware of. And, it's creating changes in our own bodies that ultimately affect us. But again, is so much of this is just below our awareness. And so I've really seen parents, they become more available when they've done this work. And so that often leads to just being able to find more steadiness for themselves. And a child will ultimately feel that, even if they can't name it.
Wow. I mean, it sounds beautiful. It sounds like what a calm household you are setting yourself up for.
I know, right? So much easier said than done.
Right.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you said, it's like flexing a new muscle. You got to build that new muscle. Like you cannot build a muscle overnight. It is just never going to happen that way. It takes a lot of repetition, takes a lot of practice. So I love that analogy. It helps people kind of like visualize and put it into perspective.
Yeah, and I also want to mention too that, for example, this co-regulation piece in some ways it's kind of important for children to see you express a range of emotions. It's important
Yeah.
for them to see you get angry. It's important for them to see you be sad. Like, I don't think that the goal should be to eliminate those negative emotions, but the goal should be that we can recover from them well. And we can sort of, again, going back to this idea of modeling, we can show our children how we sort of work through them in
Right.
a way where we feel calm and confident in doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, for parents who feel overwhelmed or burnt out, what is a realistic place to start without it adding more onto their plate, without them feeling more overwhelmed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that if you're burned out, the instinct is often to look for something to add. So, like I think supplement, a new habit, a wellness routine, coming up with some kind of plan. But I want to actually invite parents to start by looking at what's
Mm.
already there. So there's some research that I really, really love about the 7 kinds of rest. And so this concept is about the idea that rest isn't just sleep, but it's about replenishing yourself mentally, emotionally, socially, creative, etc. So I'd encourage any burned out parents to sort of sit with that framework and get honest about where their energy is
Mm.
actually going. So what is actually draining them? And then where are they genuinely able to find rejuvenation? I think that it's not always about cutting or getting rid of, but I think that sometimes rebalancing can create a surprising amount of breathing room and make you feel like you have more capacity than you realized before. Another piece I do want to say, and as a high achieving person myself, I mean this with full empathy, but burnout is often telling you that something might need to come off of your plate. And that's a hard thing to hear when you're someone who is doing a lot and doing it really, really well. Like I think probably a lot of parents listening
Oh,
to
yeah.
this are. But I think that it is worth sitting with the question, honestly, the question of what is currently on your list that is less important than your own mental health? Because very few things actually are. You cannot pour from empty. And at some point, juggling acts, it really stops being sustainable. Protecting your energies isn't a luxury or a reward that you earn after everything else that you've done. It's the foundation that sort of makes everything possible. And I think that that's something that we really need to focus more on. I think not just parents. I think adults in general, but
Yeah.
absolutely is true for parents.
Yeah, for sure. And so I kind of want to talk about like the concept of therapy because sometimes I think it can feel like a black box, right? People are just like, I don't know what happens there. Like, what is going on? So can you tell us a little bit about like what actually happens in therapy and how does that, the things that happen in therapy lead to real change?
Yeah. So in the therapy room, we look directly into your brain. No, I'm just kidding. um, I think that I mean, to clear something up just right off the bat, walking into a therapist's office does not mean that there is something wrong with you. As clinicians, we're not sitting across from you and looking for problems to diagnose or fix. That's kind of never my intention. Going into a session, meeting people, I'm not looking for things to fix. I think that therapy is really more about self exploration and growth. And a good therapist approaches the work with the understanding that you are the expert of your own life. You are in charge. We're not there to push you to make big changes that you don't want to make or tell you how to live or to, fish for crazy, deep, dark secrets. The work looks completely different for every single person because it's really built around the individual sitting in the room. And I think that truly anyone can benefit from therapy, not just people who are struggling, but anyone who wants to understand themselves more deeply and live with a little bit more intention. So I think that when we think, the question of like what actually happens through the process of talking, which kind of sounds deceptively simple, you're going to start to learn things about yourself that are hard to see when you're just living inside of your own head. You're going to start to understand your own reactions, your patterns, your thoughts and feelings, and where they're actually coming from. And therapy also sort of gives you this unique space to practice change in how you relate to others, how you communicate, how you respond to stress. With somebody there to guide you through it, and without the real world consequences that come with experimenting outside of that room. Now, I do recognize that it does take discomfort. I think growth always does, but the difference is that the growth that we sort of do in therapy happens in a safer, supported space that doesn't require you having to navigate change alone. And that combination of honest self reflection plus a skilled guide plus a space where it's okay to be messy is really what I think leads to lasting real change.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think you like really took the veil off, right? Like you really opened the door. There's some light in that box now. That was like a very good way, I feel like, for people to comprehend what happens in therapy, and especially for someone who like has never done therapy before to kind of take the pressure off of it and like ease up
Yeah.
a bit, right? It does seem like a very scary process. And I mean, you recognize, right? Like there is that
Yeah.
bit of discomfort that's going to be there. But I think for people who are scared to try, it's helpful to realize that when you're going into the room with your clinician, it's not like they're in the driver's seat necessarily. Like you're in the driver's seat. Like you are there to figure out what you want to figure out and to explore the areas you want to explore. Now, does that mean there are going to be some things that might be uncomfy? Probably. But you saying that, the person is in the driver's seat, not the clinician, I think is super helpful to for people to, kind of come away with.
Yeah, I think that for me as a clinician, I almost see myself um, more as like walking with you, not
Mm,
not as somebody sort of dragging somebody else along. It's your life that you're living, and I am just here to walk alongside you and help you up and down the mountains. Like I'm not here to show you the path. I'm not here to tell you whether to take a left or a right. I'm just here to follow and help carry the camping bags.
oh, wow, what a fun visual. I love that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. What are some of the common like patterns or habits that you see in parents that, might unintentionally impact their kids' emotional or like behavioral development?
Yeah, so I think that one of the most common and heartbreaking patterns that I see is when love and pain come from the same place.
Mm,
And I think that this is both, when I see this experience happen for children, and then also when I see adults who have experienced this as children coming to
yeah.
me. I see this as well. And it can be subtle. It might look like affection or reward that's sort of tangled up in criticism, withdrawal, or punishment. When a child learns that the person that they love the most is also a source of hurt or unpredictability, they don't stop loving the parent, but they do start developing complicated relationships with love itself. What
Mm,
children carry into adulthood isn't usually the specific things that were said or done, it's how those moments made them feel. And here's something important to understand about human psychology, and that's that we don't naturally gravitate towards what's healthy. We gravitate towards what's familiar. So patterns
mm,
that feel normal, even if they're painful, tend to repeat across generations, even without, anyone intending them to.
wow.
And so this is where attachment framework becomes such a valuable lens for parents. It invites you to look at your own experiences growing up, how you were parented, what felt safe, what didn't, and then honestly examine how those experiences are quietly shaping the way that you show up for your own children today. And that kind of reflection can be uncomfortable, but it's also really freeing. And one of the most important things that I want parents to hear is that rupture is inevitable. Every
Mm,
parent loses their patience, does the wrong thing, or gets it wrong sometimes. And that's okay. That's not the part that defines your child's development. What matters enormously is going to be the repair that follows. So, going back, acknowledging what happened, and reconnecting. And that repair is actually one of the most powerful things that you can model for your child. It teaches them that relationships can survive conflict, accountability is possible, and that they are worth coming back to. So, again, I know that I started this by saying that, mixing up reward and withdraw punishment can, be this negative thing. I think that is kind of scary for parents to hear because, going through day-to-day life, that's kind of what happens.
Yeah.
One second you're happy and in a good mood and loving your child, and the next second, there are temper tantrums and people are mad and rules have been broken, and so I do very much recognize that the pendulum is constantly swinging, and I want to validate that that's real and that's okay. What's important is that your child knows that we're swinging on this pendulum together, and that you no matter what are going to be a safe support for them. I
Yeah.
think that that's really what's most important.
Yeah. And you brought up another great question of like, how is it that parents begin to respond differently in tough moments with their child, especially when they themselves are dysregulated?
Yeah, so I think that we talked about awareness a little bit earlier, and so I think that kind of the first and most important step is going to be learning to recognize and reflect.
Mm,
And really, the best place to start is going to be in the moment when those things are actually happening. And that's a really hard skill to build. I will just call that out. Because when we're dysregulated, the last thing our nervous system wants or can do is pause. But so much, of what shows up as anger, irritability, or an outsized reaction to something that your child has done, I think that usually it comes from, or often comes from, a place of fear. And, fear that they're falling behind, fear that you as a parent are failing them, fear that something you are seeing in them reflects something about you. So I think that it's important, when we start to ask ourselves as a parent, what am I actually afraid of right now? Instead of just reacting to the surface behavior, you're really going to start to see some shifts when you begin to sort of do those reflective questions. It's also going to help enormously to remember that your child does not have your lived experience. They do not share your timeline, your sense
mm,
of urgency, your understanding of consequences. So, what looks like defiance, laziness, it's often just a child being exactly where they are developmentally right now. And they need us to meet them there, not drag them into being, an adult or living by adult expectations. So,
right.
again, I think that sort of to kind of summarize all of that, I think that our reactions often come from a different, deeper place than it might seem surface level. And that, if you are able to sort of pause in that moment, remembering that what your child's doing is also just where they are right now. They're not an
Yeah.
adult and they're not supposed to be an adult. And so getting caught up in our own expectations is, something that I think being more reflective about can be, it can be really helpful. Um,
Yeah.
I think that there's also a bigger picture worth keeping in mind when the pressure of these moments starts to build, and that's that the things that actually make children successful in life, successful in their relationships, their careers, their sense of self, are often the soft skills. So, emotion regulation, empathy, resilience, the ability to repair and connect. Research shows that it's not the number of extracurriculars on their schedule, it's not their grades, it's not these sort of measurable achievements alone. Those things, they do matter, but they're not the whole picture. And they're definitely not what the child needs from you in hard moments. What they need is a parent who's working on themselves enough to stay present, to take a breath, and then respond rather than react. You definitely don't have to be perfect at it all. You definitely don't have to, create this perfect life or schedule for your child. You just sort of have to keep coming back to the things that you're working on, the things that you want to make better, those moments of connection.
Yeah. Love that. So if a parent is like things and they're thinking like, this is me, I know I need all the support, but I have no idea like where to even start. What would you want them to do next?
Yeah. So if that's where you are, first, I just want to say that that awareness in itself is so meaningful. So give yourself credit for that. So, I would then say start small and close. Look around at what's already in front of you. Who are other parents in your neighborhood or your community who share your values and might be feeling exactly the same way? I think that sometimes the most powerful support begins with an honest conversation with somebody who gets it. Doesn't have to be an expert, just somebody who gets it. If you do have the access, then I do, want to note that not everybody does have, copious amounts of social support. I think that that's important to acknowledge. But if you do have the access, check in, with your family, generations above, generations below. The people who are coming up sort of alongside you might hold
Mhm.
more wisdom and shared experience than we often think to tap into. Again, if you have the support, ask friends. If you feel like you have neighbors with children who are accessible, ask them. Explore Facebook groups. And then, if you're ready and if you feel like you have the means, then I think it's time to consider more structured support like therapy, whether that's going to be individual therapy to tend to your own inner world or family therapy to work through dynamics together as a unit. You don't have to do all of it at once, and you don't have to have it all figured out before you start. I think it's really just important to take those small steps that feel possible and trust that, each step is going to be sort of enough as you go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I appreciate you saying like you don't have to have it all figured out before you get there. Like just you got to just start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is one mindset shift that you wish more parents could make that would immediately like reduce the stress at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will also just kind of say, and I don't think I've said it yet in the interview, but I'm not a parent myself.
Mm.
So I cannot speak to how easy these shifts might be. But I think that one mindset shift I wish more parents could make is embracing truly reasonable expectations of their children, and just as importantly of themselves. Change is hard. There's no recipe, there's no perfect formula that works for every family or every child. And the sooner that parents are sort of able to release that idea that there is, the lighter that things get. I've seen that a lot of parental stress comes from my clients holding themselves to a standard of consistency and calm that no human being can actually maintain. And this is where I think that self compassion becomes not just a nice idea, but actually a practical tool. For example, there's a branch, a theory called acceptance and commitment therapy. And within this sort of model, there's a concept that I find really useful here, which is the distinction between our values and our behavior. So, our values are who we want to be, which might look like patient, present, warm, steady. Um, our behavior is what we actually do in the given moment. And those two do not always match. And I think that rather than using that gap as a reason for shame, I really want to invite parents to get curious about it. So think about, what percentage of the time are you actually showing up in alignment with your values? And when you're not showing up in alignment with your values, what's going on? What's getting in the way for you? Um, so here's the reframe that I think can be genuinely sort of relieving for parents, and that's that feeling bad after a hard moment with your child is not evidence that you were a bad parent. It's actually evidence of the opposite. That inner discomfort, that rub that you feel when you've acted against your own values means your moral compass is working. It means that you do know better and that you want to do better. And that really matters. So acknowledge it, name it to your child when it's appropriate. And that modeling, again, is going to be so powerful. Then let it move through you rather than harden into shame. So I think just kind of letting some things go also. Not holding on to all of the
Mm.
mistakes that we make. And I also want to offer this. So I think that most of us would never speak to a friend, a coworker, or a stranger the way that we sometimes speak to our kids in a hard moment. We extend patience and grace to people
Mm.
we barely know, and yet the people we love the most can somehow get the worst of us. Noticing that gap without judgment is often the first step to closing it. And I think that it's important to also sort of think about, what this, values, behavior stuff kind of looks like in context. So, for example, if you value time on the floor with your toddler, maybe a fully home cooked dinner can be subbed out for a frozen pizza. And that's okay. It doesn't
Mm.
make you any
Right.
worse of a parent. because you didn't have, the whole roasted chicken on the table. Like you got to be on the floor playing
Exactly.
with your toddler in that moment. And that's what you value. And that's what's important. And like you were there, you can't get that moment back. You did what you valued in that moment. And that's so beautiful. Who cares about what else happened? If
Right.
you want to be present in the morning for toothbrushing and hairstyling, then maybe it's okay to be 5 minutes late to work. Um, Parenthood is it's full of judgment calls. And different calls,
Yeah.
they're all okay as long as it's aligning with the values that you want it to align with in those moments.
Yeah. Oh, diving into that and giving some examples for people. Like, I think as you get older, you like realize how much like time is really valuable and connection. And you don't like, especially as like a student or like being in high school or whatever, you to just kind of like go, 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 get to the next thing. And then you like get into adulthood and you're like, oh, like maybe it's not super important that every dish in my house is sparkling. Like maybe it's more important that I like talk to my parents on the phone.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I loved your, talking about maybe today is frozen pizza night and we're sitting on the floor and having a ball because like you said, that is a special moment and that will be remembered, not the roast chicken on the table.
Yeah. And I think to not beat yourself up because you picked one or the other, right? Like
Right.
you did the thing that aligned with your values. You did it.
Yeah.
So check mark. You got it. Like
You
pat
did it. You
yourself on the
did it.
back. You did it. Yes. Don't think
Exactly.
about what you didn't do. It's like what you did do. I think giving credit to that as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has been wonderful. I think a lot of people are gonna take, the whole thing and really digest it and have fantastic nuggets that they can like remember throughout the day. And then I also think that this is gonna encourage like a number of people to like get to therapy. Like I think it's gonna be so helpful for folks. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing all of this, info and going into all of the fancy words that we maybe don't know as people who are not in your field, but now we do know them and it helps us understand things better.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much for having me. I had
Of
such a
course.
great time getting to, be on my soapbox.
Love it. It's perfect. Great soapbox. Yeah. Thank you so much to the audience for listening. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a little rating and review. It helps other folks find the podcast, and we'll chat with you next time.